was invited to give this speech. There was an Arab-American lady, a lawyer, who was absolutely incensed that I was coming here today. But let me tell you why I responded to this invitation immediately and happily. First, I want to publicly express my deep gratitude to Commissioner Ray Kelly. 2 years ago, he sent his deputy, Commissioner Cohen, to meet me to say that there was a credible threat against my life. At the time of the crisis, we received many threats to our office. I had not been in the department. We had care and attention given to me personally, to my family, to my workers in my office, and to the mosque on Park Place. We don't know what would happen to our community. So Commissioner Kelly and to the Americans and New York's finest, I have to stand here before you publicly and thank you and the police officers for what they have done. A couple of weeks ago, I was in Jakarta on my book tour, sponsored by the US Embassy in Jakarta. And I was having several interviews with the media as well. And one of the questions asked was about the NYPD incident. I wish I had been invited before I was there. And here's how I answered. The issue before us today, there is a myth that many people have, both Americans and Muslims. Americans have a myth that Islam is an enemy of America. And Muslims in many parts of the Muslim world have a myth that America is the enemy of Muslims. But I've stated before and will state again that the real enemy of Islam and Muslims in America is not the Christians or the Jews or the Hindus. The real battlefront that we are waging today is not between Islam and the West, but between all of the moderates of all faith traditions against all of the extremists in all faith traditions and in all places of the world. And this is a battlefront that we have to wage. And we have to wage it in several ways. Part of the battlefront is the role of religious leaders. It lies in the realm of theology. Another part, at the other end, is the law enforcement end, which is the role of the law enforcement agencies. It is the role of academics, who need to help educate our people on not only our faith traditions, but the underlying currents that create these tensions. Commissioner Ray Kelly is probably from Irish background. The Irish troubles were not because there's a fundamental enmity between Protestants and Catholics. We have to understand the root causes for extremism and battle them together, both in the arena of education and winning hearts and minds and souls, as well as make sure that the criminal element, the radical element, does not gain the upper hand. This is why I stand before you today, because we have to work together, and we must work together if we're going to get rid of the scourge of radicalism and extremism all over the world. Right after 9/11, I was honored to be invited by the head of the FBI office in New York City to speak to all 1,200 agents, which took about 2 months to do, because I had to come to speak to only 200 at the time. They didn't have no FBI agents working. And I was deeply honored by this and deeply impressed by the sensitivity and the concern that was expressed by the FBI in making sure we worked with the FBI, because radicalism is our common enemy. I can't say this more frequently. And radicals exist everywhere. They exist in our mosques, they exist in our communities, they exist in the media. I dare to say that there are probably radicals even in the police department. We know that for a fact, in our own families. This is why I say it again, the battlefront is not between some kind of a mythical idea, but between extremists who have a belief or conviction that their way is the only way, and that everybody of that group is our enemy. Abraham Lincoln said that a house divided against itself will not stand, and a city divided against itself will not stand. We're all here. We're all Americans, proud to be here. And we're Muslims and proud of our faith tradition as well. The journey that American Muslims are now undergoing in America parallels in many ways the journeys that the Irish community, the Catholic community, the Jewish community, as it came here and suffered its own repression at the hands of the majority community until they found their American legs, so to speak. And this is part of what I write about in the last that we mentioned in this program, that we as American Muslims have to evolve ourselves from being just Muslims in America, many of us first generation, to evolving and developing an American cultural identity, an American institutional identity, certain aspects of American law and abiding by American law, and developing the cultural, institutional, legal aspects which define us as American Muslims. This is the work before us today, and we have to work with the legal experts and with all the various experts to evolve this American Muslim identity. I also wish to thank you, Commissioner Ray, for wishing us a happy Ramadan. For Ramadan is a very special time for us, something like Lent for Christians and Catholics. The difference that we don't just give up chocolate or food of our choice, but we give up every kind of food and drink and even smoking and even physical intimacy with our spouses from dawn until sunset for the period of a month. But the purpose of it, as the Prophet said, is not to starve ourselves or to make ourselves thirsty. And the Prophet said in one of his teachings that many a fasting person gains nothing from his fast but hunger and thirst. And many a person who prays gains nothing from his prayers except fatigue. The purpose of Ramadan for us is to reconnect our souls with the Creator, the one God, and to develop a deeper spiritual grounding from which develops not only our spiritual sense and recognition of God as our common Creator and Lord, whom we worship and adore and serve, but also develop a much better sense of the ethics which grounds us as Muslims. We share with our Christian and Jewish brothers and sisters the two commandments that are most important to our faiths. When Jesus was asked once, what is the greatest commandment? He said, to love the Lord thy God with all of your heart, all of your minds, all of your soul, all of your strength. And the second commandment, which he said is equal to it, is to love thy neighbor as thyself. And then he adds something which most people don't remember. Upon these two commandments hangs all of the law and all the prophets. So for Muslims, the law enforcement in Jesus' language is actually the protection and the practice of these two major commandments, to love our God and love our neighbors. And our neighbors are not only our physical neighbors, in the globalized world is all of humanity. But as the adage goes, charity starts at home, and we as New Yorkers have to be most charitable and most loving to those who are our physical neighbors. And as Muslims living here, we know we're a minority. We know we are subject to some degree of scrutiny. We know that there is suspicion. And the response to that is even to be more ethical, to be more upright. We have to fight for our civil rights, and I'm convinced that the police department wants us to battle for our civil rights. But we have a responsibility as loving neighbors, as kind neighbors, especially and more so in this month of Ramadan, to exhibit these traits that our Prophet Muhammad is blessed to be upon him, and all the prophets, Jesus, Moses, etc., taught us. And therefore I urge both our own community and the police department to work together and to love each other in this sense. But loving each other does not mean that we overlook the mistakes of ourselves or each other. Like a loving parent that corrects his child and loves his child and cares for his child, we too have to be caring and loving to each other. And because no human being is perfect, I myself am always cognizant of the gap between my ideal and my reality. And no community is perfect. We know the gap between the ideal community and its reality. We too have to recognize the gap between ideals and reality in ourselves and in everybody else. And we have to work together to make sure that our reality increasingly gets close to our ideal. I'm convinced and I have faith that our Commissioner, Ray Kelly, is committed to achieving this ideal, no matter how much the gap persists and continues. But we have to help each other. We have to help the police department be indeed the finest of the finest. The police department has to help us also adhere to our faith traditions as better Muslims and better believers in God, the one God, the common God that we all love and worship and adore. I'm grateful for having been invited to you here. I wish you all a very blessed and happy Ramadan. May it be a time when we experience what is called the night of power. For us, the month of Ramadan represents, Commissioner, and those of you who are Muslims, the anniversary of the event when the Quran was first revealed to our Prophet Muhammad. This night is called the night of power, night of Qadr. And therefore this month is a month in which Muslims aspire to get a taste of this experience of God, the experience of the night of power. I pray that Allah Almighty, the one God of us all, grant us the ability to get a taste of this spiritual power, of this night of power, this month of power, and may we be better neighbors, better lovers of our neighbors, and better believers in the one God who created us all and wants us to live as one community. For there's a verse in the Quran said more than one time, which God speaks about the different prophets, including Moses and Jesus and Muhammad. And then he says, this your nation, this your ummah, is one community, and I am your Lord, so worship me. Therefore we here in New York, the most cosmopolitan of all nations, are one city, one community. We are under one God. And as Americans, we can believe that a nation under God conceived in liberty and justice for all. This is why I say the American social contract is very Islamic, very Sharia compliant in its objectives, very compliant with the very principles of our religion. And I believe we want us all to demonstrate that